and welcome to Counterpressed on the Ringer and Spotify. I'm in the studio with Jessy Humphreys, Gilly Flaherty, and back for more Nedum Onuoha.
So nice. What is that, to do it twice?
Yeah, of course. Glad to have you back. On today's show, we're going to be previewing Group C and D at Euro 2025 because we are now just about a week or so away from the tournament kicking off on the 2nd of July, getting very excited. And of course, Group D is where England and Wales are. So we've got to talk about that group, of course. So let's start, though, first with Group C, Denmark, Germany, Poland, Sweden. We're going to get into it after this. This episode is presented by Pepsi Max. Pepsi Max has always supported both women's and men's football. So to help make sure the next 50 years are as legendary as the last, they've made an inspiring film called Refresh the Game, featuring current stars like Lauren James and Leah Williamson, alongside legends like Pele. Refresh the Game celebrates the unapologetic challenger spirit and talent of women's football. Watch it now on Pepsi Max channels. Pepsi Max, proud sponsors of the UEFA Women's Euro this summer. So, Group C, a really interesting group, has some similarities with a group that we saw in 2022 because Denmark and Germany are drawn together once again. But then some really strong teams in this group, some debutants in Poland, which is very exciting, and some sides that may struggle a little bit. But I want to start first with Denmark, ranked 12th in the world currently, have had some not so great results in the build up to this tournament. And having spoken to a few different people, I think a lot of people are worried that this could be a really bad tournament for Denmark and they might struggle in this group. I'd be intrigued to see what you guys think about that. But some big defeats recently, lost 6-1 to Sweden, only narrowly beat Wales, got beaten 3-0 by Italy, these are their Nations League results. So it's been poor 2025 up to this point. And even though they only narrowly lost to Spain in their qualifying for this tournament, I think this could be a tournament in which we ask questions about where Denmark fall in the European standings. Anyone want to join me in that assessment, or anyone feeling more positive about Denmark's chances?
Yeah, they feel very much still like the Pernille Harder team, don't they? And I do think, since Harder's been at Bayern, we've probably seen her move back to her best. She's managed to stay injury-free, which obviously really affected her in her time at Chelsea. But it does feel like beyond Harder, there's not necessarily a whole lot going for the rest of this team. I do obviously love Sarah Holmgaard, who had a great season and is leaving Everton to go and join Real Madrid. It's going to be interesting because Andre Jeglerts, the manager, is heavily linked with that Manchester City job. So it's going to be an interesting one to watch how they look, if those links are true. It does feel like this is quite a tough group for them. I also think, Denmark are kind of an interesting team. I'm like, they feel like maybe they've overperformed sort of in the past decade, especially pushed by having someone like Harder to lead them, and maybe sort of we're just seeing them fall back a bit more naturally to where they exist in the football ecosystem. Maybe that's unfair, but yeah, I think in a group with Sweden and Germany, this will feel like quite a tough ask, I think.
And he's already announced he's stepping down after the Euros. The expectation is he's going to take that Man City job. Nedum, obviously, something you'll be looking at.
Yes.
How tough is it when you know your manager is already leaving and then you're going into a major tournament? Does that help sometimes? Is it sort of like, let's do one last hurrah together? Or do you think the players will already be feeling like, well, he's on to the next thing anyway?
I think that's a good question. I don't know how you see this, Gilly, but I think as a player, you can't really be lied to by a manager. You can see whether they're in it or they're not. So it's not necessarily for me the fact that, say, you'll be leaving at the end of the tournament. It's like, what's he like on a day-to-day basis? I think sometimes a manager might think they're being normal, but you can sense when they're not because you see them all the time. You know what I mean? So maybe, is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? I think it's tough to read because I don't know what the players are like with him anyway. You know, if they really loved him, then there might be a sense of sadness and they might want to try and do something, celebrate that last sort of like hurrah. But if they don't connect with him, and given some of the results that they've had, I think they're probably waiting for the tournament to be over as soon as possible, to be honest.
I think that's the unfortunate sense that you would definitely get from those results, yes. And also, we still don't know if that Man City job, if that's the job he's going to go into, is going to be announced before the tournament starts, because that also could play a part, because it's almost one of these things where we all know the direction's going in, but he also may well say, you know, I don't want it to be announced at the tournament because I don't want it to be a distraction. But then you've still got this big thing hanging over you. Yeah. Jill, what do you think about that?
You know, I think on that point as well, we talk about it at school that like, when, like, say, a teacher, or even coming up to the end of the school year, there gets to a point where you like sort of check out, and we've noticed it as well.
I love now your comparisons aren't football comparisons; they're teaching comparisons. Wow, Gilly, you've changed.
I've matured.
Yeah,
but like even saying like when it's like say for example when a teacher gives their notice in, straight away you can see that they've completely checked out because they're thinking of what's coming up next. So that's what I think is he knows that he's going after the Euro. So realistically, does it matter in the sense of course you'd have personal pride. You'd still like to think that as a manager and even as a player you'd have that personal pride. But when you know that when it's done you're off, could there be that potential where you're a bit like, I've checked out anyway, let's just sort of enjoy the ride? Or is it going to be, I think it's a bit different if you knew you was at a team that was probably, there's more chance of winning it because you'd probably think like, this is the last hurrah, whatever, let's go on, let's go try and get a trophy or whatever. But I feel like when you're not in that position, it's probably a little bit harder.
And I think if I were Denmark, I would have much rather been drawn in, say, Group A. I mean, I think everyone wanted to be in Group A, but that's a group in which they would have felt like, oh, okay, we can match some of these teams, give ourselves a good chance. I think they have, unfortunately, been drawn in a group, like you say, Jessy, where the two most important games against Germany and Sweden, I can't see them getting a result in, and that's going to be such a challenge. Which takes me on to Germany, because they are a team that I think a lot of people will have an eye on alongside Spain, France and England as one of the favourites to at least get to semi-finals and potentially win. They're a team that has such amazing history in this competition, been such a dominant force. They've won it so many times, obviously runners-up in 2022. And they're actually finding some good form, having had that post-World Cup transition. They're finding some good form at the right time. And now I think they are going to be serious contenders, Jessy.
Yeah, I've been impressed with Germany when I've watched them. I watched their game against the Netherlands. I watched them absolutely thrash Scotland. And I think what feels really exciting about this Germany team right now is like the amount of variety they have in attack. I do think defensively, like on paper, they still don't feel amazing. But I think it feels like at the moment they've got so much going forward. They've got players they can bring off the bench. They've got a lot of players who are in very good form. And also like a core of players who have now been playing together for quite a long time, but are actually only just coming into their peak years. So when you're thinking about sort of Leah Schuler, Clara Bull, they're kind of figures that you feel like they've been around the German set up for so long that you sort of forget they're only just sort of getting to the age where, you know, they're really ready to show the best. There's obviously been quite a lot of, maybe controversially for some players, but like a decision to move some players on at different points. But I think this was a Germany team that probably needed a bit of a refresh, to be totally honest. And yeah, they've looked really, really good in some of their recent games. And I definitely think going forward, they're going to be a team to watch. Obviously, also a bit of a blow not having Oberdorf be able to get back to full fitness for this tournament. But we've seen what Schukenusken can do, despite the fact that she wears number 9 for Germany, which I hate that. So wrong. But, you know, they have sort of other, you know, midfield options there. So... yeah, I'm still enjoying it. And Katrin Berger's, you know, glory years with Germany as well, and Olympic bronze medalist. So
it's a very different Germany to we're used to seeing, because we saw them just narrowly lose to England in that Euros finals. They didn't have a good World Cup. They didn't have a good 2019 World Cup either, but they did have a good Paris Olympic Games. But in terms of the squad, it's a really refreshed team because you've got no Marajan, who obviously stepped out a couple of years ago now. No Pop, which is, for the first time in a very long time. No Rauch, and that's been quite controversial because she's been a little bit vocal about no longer being part of the setup. So it does feel like this 2.0 era for Germany. And I think that's quite nice because it feels like the shackles are off a little bit, Nedum, because the expectation on some of those star names who had fallen short in recent tournaments. Now these players, although there's still a couple of players who were part of those groups, these players can kind of go in with nothing to lose, and they've had some big results. And although Germany haven't won this competition since 2013 now, which is over 10 years, they've won it 8 times in total, it feels like there's always such a good chance for them, and they'll always be so highly kind of ranked in this competition. But there's almost like a young freshness to them.
Are you trying to talk me into them winning the whole thing? That's what that felt like.
A little bit, yeah.
I've heard it whispered in the pubs of London.
I think
some people are saying Germany as a team.
Are you some people?
Am I some people? Yeah, I mean, I go between sort of Germany and Spain as my sort of favourites for this. And so much will depend how the tournament works out. But I think Germany look good, and I think they kind of look quietly good. They don't have the pressure of Spain. They don't have the pressure of England. They can almost go in knowing that they've bombed in some recent major tournaments but done well in others.
You don't think that's pressure?
I don't think they have the pressure of Spain and England on them.
For me, maybe not. You've got me there. You have got me thinking. Just because, like, is it a guarantee that they'll say finish top of their group, for example, or could Sweden not prove a bit of an issue for them?
I like Sweden in major tournaments. I think they are always good, but Germany, with the attacking depth that Jessy mentioned, the number of goals they've been scoring. Obviously, Sweden, we always know, are defensively robust. But I think Germany will top the group for me. I think Sweden should come second. And I think then, obviously, Germany should be at that advantage advancing through that path as group winners as well.
Yeah, I'm buying stock in that. Yeah.
You're buying my stock. Okay, easy sell.
Yeah.
Gilly, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I really like Germany in the Olympics, and I felt, in all honesty, they should have beaten the USA as well in that. And I felt the previous tournaments, obviously, I think Germany's name carried them a lot because of obviously what they've done previously. And I think then they had a little bit of a blip where they've obviously not hit the expectations that they've previously set for themselves. But I do feel, watching them in the Olympics, that this was a sort of a Germany side that had a bit more enthusiasm and belief about themselves. So yeah, I mean, it's good if there's more teams in it in this tournament, that it's not just a one-horse race and that other teams are looking good. So yeah, put Germany into the mix as well. And I mean, I've got them as my winners in my group.
Yeah, I think so, and I think they should make it to the semi-finals at least. Really, then you get to the real dark horse in this group, which is Poland, because this is their first major tournament. The star girl is Eva Pajor, and we know she's had a phenomenal season for Barcelona, but there is going to be a lot of pressure on her to essentially carry this team and do something, and that's tough. But I actually think even just getting here is a tremendous achievement for them, and obviously hopefully will spark something really exciting for Polish women's football. Jessy, how do you think Poland are going to shape up in what is quite a tough group for them?
Yeah, I mean, I think for Poland, it's a bit like they're in a similar position to Wales, that I think this kind of becomes a bit of a free hit for them. I think when you've got a player like Pajor, you're always going to feel like you've got someone who can take that one chance if it comes. But I think really this is going to be about enjoying the experience, soaking it all up. Poland have a lot of like quite exciting young players coming through, and something that I thought was interesting that Rhian Wilkinson said about Wales was that what this experience offered Wales's younger players is that they don't know anything different from like qualifying for a major tournament. And obviously it's not that simple when you're a team who's ranked sort of where Wales and Poland are in sort of that more 30 in the world kind of place. But I think, yeah, when you've got sort of the young group of players Poland have coming through, and they're seeing, you know, the senior team go and play in the Euros and all of that, what that represents for them, I think Poland feel like a nation who I don't think it's gonna come off for them now. But I think what they're doing is they're sowing the seeds for to become a country who I think will see rise up the rankings in years to come.
Yeah, I think this is almost like the start of something bigger for Poland moving forward. And then we have Sweden, who, like Germany, are always in those final four spots. They've had success at, you know, recent Olympic Games, not in Paris, but in previous editions. They've always been a team that have been very good at navigating major tournaments. But they're that much older now. They've still got these senior players who are several tournaments deep. But I still always expect them to do something just because they know and they're so familiar with these surroundings, these experiences. They've got that experience, even if they're that much older. And I do expect them still to finish runners up in this group and progress. But it's whether they can get beyond the quarterfinal, I think, is going to be the biggest question, and whether they have kind of the goal scoring power as much as the defensive robustness. They still have this maybe over-reliance on set pieces, even when they've tried to add a little bit more creativity. Nedum, I feel like you go hot and cold. Some days you are hot on Sweden doing well, and other days you're like, actually, I'm not sure about these guys.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think they do get out of the group, but what would their path be if they finish second? Who would they be playing in the first knockout?
So if they finished runner-up behind Germany, they could play England if England finished top. Now, Sweden have had not bad results against England, obviously outside of that Euros semi-final when they did get smashed. You would still say England win that game.
I love how you can just describe things in football. They got smashed.
But I think England would, be favourites to win that game, but it's still a game that Sweden have a good chance in.
Yeah,
but that's
sure.
their path.
Yeah, for sure. And for me, they would be a dark horse as such, but I could see them playing up into that role. I think sometimes, for teams in fact, I don't know if you guys would agree, but I think one of the worst feelings you can have in football is being a favourite, which is why I think sometimes, like when we hear people talk about teams are going to be playing, they're a really good side, they're this, they're that, to almost like close the gap a little bit, because everyone kind of wants to be the underdog, because you can play in a sort of different style. But I think if they're in the knockouts, I think they've got a good chance potentially against anybody, and it wouldn't necessarily need to be the most beautiful game of football. But as you've even said there, like, the reliance on set pieces is only a bad thing when it doesn't help you win games. But when the margins can be so small sometimes, you'd absolutely take it, especially in tournament football. So I think, as you said, I blow hot and cold. I'm kind of lukewarm at the minute. But there's definitely room for them to do something.
If France were to finish winners of Group D, I think that would be a very different matchup for me than if they would be facing England.
Who do you prefer? In France, Sweden, who do you prefer there?
France, I think.
But then you prefer Sweden to England?
No, I still think both France and England would be confident that they can win those games, but I would see Sweden causing more problems for England than France.
Why?
My stock is quite high on France at the moment.
Really?
My stock's quite high on everyone, basically.
Everyone's great. Everyone's going to win
For
it.
me, this tournament comes down to 4 teams, and that is France, England, Spain, Germany. I think those are the main 4 sides that I think have a good chance at winning it. And that's why I think if any side is coming up against one of those 4 teams, it's tough.
Okay.
And that's kind of where I stand more generally.
Okay.
Who do we think is coming out of Group C, Jill?
I've gone Germany in top, and then I've gone Sweden in second.
Yeah, I think that's a solid choice. Be same for me. Jessy?
Yeah, I would say the same. I think Sweden They're obviously incredibly experienced. Obviously, this is going to be Peter Gerhardsen's last tournament. They've got Tony Gustafsson coming in. And I think, unlike with what we spoke about with Denmark, I think this will be a more rally around the manager, because obviously he's been there for so long. But I just find Sweden quite flaky and quite boring. And they have players in Blackstenius, in Canarid, who can have these moments and then also can just disappear for games and games at a time. So, I mean, Blackstenius obviously is Mrs. Cult Hero, and she scores in a lot of big games.
She loves the big occasion. You can't deny it.
She does love the big occasion. But yeah, the squad is too old for me. I mean, in some ways it's incredible. I think they've got 6 players with more than 100 caps, and then Rolfo's the 7th, she's on 98. So there's a lot of players who played a lot of international football, but I think it's just missing the spark that makes me be like, oh, I really want to watch this team play.
Yeah, but I agree with you in terms of that one last hurrah, because Hardson's so popular with the players, a popular guy overall in terms of like quite an eccentric, funny character. I think that could spark something, but they've still got to obviously try and deliver on the pitch. Nedum, what are you thinking?
No more hipster picks for me. I'm just going Germany, Sweden. Yeah, gonna keep it real.
You out-hipstered yourself in the last episode.
It was way too much in the last episode, yeah.
All right, so that's Group C. Let's get on to Group D. Of course, England and Wales in this group, so we'll get on to it after this. So Group D, England, France, Netherlands, Wales. Going to save the England chat for the end. And when it comes to Wales, we're going to be joined by Welsh journalist Sion Misra. So we'll focus on France and Netherlands first. I want to talk about France because in the previous section just there, they are one of the top 4 teams in this competition for me. But, and it's a big but, we know that France have a history of coming into major tournaments with a stacked squad, with looking good and shitting the bed, to put it bluntly. And there's always pre-tournament drama, and it's the same again going in here. Things have notoriously kind of imploded when it was their home tournament in 2019. It happened, after the tournament and in the lead up. The Paris Olympics didn't quite go to plan either. So I do feel like it's going to be so much of it's going to come down to that opening game against England. And both of those sides will be feeling like if we start this tournament well, we've got a really good chance at getting to the final and winning it all. And it's going to be an amazing opening game between them. But there is so much talent in this France team on paper, especially when you look at the attacking talent that we've obviously all seen in the Champions League when it comes to Katoto and Diani, but also defensively, it's a strong squad. Jessy, I know you're feeling the same way as me in terms of what France could do, but we still do have this drama going in. No Renard, no Le Sommer, and also no Kenza Dali, who was very angry about it.
I'm so sorry to Kenza, but I just can't include her with those other 2.
No, but you know why I include her in it is because she was the one who's commented on it.
Yes.
Renard and Le Sommer were kind of quiet about it, and they weren't in the Nations League squad already, so the writing was kind of on the wall. But Kenza Dali has been very vocally not happy about it, and sort of saying like I will comment and speak on it after the tournament. But do you think that drama is enough to upset the apple cart, or do you think, a bit like England, there's going to be enough time for them to recover before the action actually starts? I will certainly say from the results that France have put together over the past couple of months, it doesn't seem to be affecting stuff. I'm not Le Sommer, I feel whatever about. I do think Renard is a surprising omission just because she's really tall, and I would always take a really tall player who you could bring off the bench, to be totally honest. But at the same time, if a manager sort of wants to make their mark and if he doesn't think Renard's up to playing
at centre-back. I mean, again, I don't know if I really agree, but I understand why managers want to do that. In some ways, it feels similar to Wiegman and Steph Houghton, even though I think, Steph was playing at a lower level than where Renard is at that point in time. But France, they're in really good form. They're scoring for fun. There's a lot of players who feel like they're coming off the back of good seasons. You look at Sandy Baltimore at Chelsea. You've also got kind of like Kelly Gago and Melvin Millard doing this, fun, adding this depth to the team. So it feels like there are a lot of options for France to have, and they can play in quite a lot of different ways. So yeah, I think generally I've been quite impressed with France. And the thing I will say is, I know sort of the classic France implosion thing is a thing, and they didn't have a great Olympics. But I do think when you look at their past 2 international tournaments, and obviously that was under different managers, in 2022, the semi-final against Germany was actually quite tight in the end, and they battled through a lot in terms of losing Katoto in that first group game, and I thought performed fairly admirably across the tournament. Then in 2023, they go out in the mammoth penalty shootout against Australia, who are the host, obviously a crazy, crazy atmosphere. So I do kind of feel like with this crop of players, we're due a good France run.
But then on the flip side, my point would be, in all those games where they've been close, they haven't got over the line. Because I think they had a really good chance in the Euros to get into that final. Right,
but I would also say that feels to me very similar to where England were in coming into 2022, where and I think France have generally been a bit more up and down, and obviously the expectation with France has gone on for longer because French women's football has historically been the best. And, obviously I think the failure to turn that dominant Lyon team, which had a lot of French stars into a really good international team, will always be a disappointment there. But when you've gone through a phase and you've had players who've had those near misses like England had, sometimes at some point it just clicks. And I just wonder if this could be the summer where it clicks for France.
Yeah, it's about whether it's the moment where they finally turn from bridesmaids into bride. Because even in 2019 in the World Cup, they only narrowly lost that game to the USA. So it just feels like whenever they've been knocking on the door, they've always fallen short. And for England now have become this side where they don't even need to necessarily play well, but they know how to navigate major tournaments so well that they got to a World Cup final having only really played well in 1 or 2 games. And having that experience and know-how to kind of rough it through is so important. And I don't know if France have that yet, but like you say, Jessy, maybe this is the moment it suddenly appears. Jill, what do you think about France's chances?
I like France, and I think, again, you're looking at their previous tournaments, they probably haven't done what they should be doing. I think in regards to the players being left out, I feel like if France go on to have a really good tournament and have success, then people will be saying, that's the right decision. But I do feel something like that leaving more so Samer and obviously Renard is a little bit different to Ken's Darley as well. But if they're left out and they don't have a great tournament, I just feel like that's going to be a big excuse straight away. Well, you've obviously left those players at home who could have done something differently.
I want to ask you guys, because we'll talk about it with England, obviously, but I've already mentioned Rauch and Darley, who are both very vocal about not being part of squads. Nedum and Jill, as players, where do you fall on people going on social media and getting loud about not being included? How much do you think that damages the team?
I just think from a personal point of view, if you want to get back into that squad, for me, I wouldn't be saying anything. I just think at the end of the day, it's a manager's decision. And I also do think it's sort of this, it's not about you, it's about the team. I've never been one to, I'm trying to think about squads that you're talking about the England Euros, obviously it was a little bit different because I wasn't a main player and I weren't really a main squad player, but obviously I missed out on even getting into standby. But I would never have, it's just not in my nature, I would have come out. And I think even if I was a main player as such, I don't think I would, if I still wanted to get back into that squad, I don't think I would be saying, I'd be wishing the girls good luck and stuff. But I think it depends on necessarily where that player is in regards to their career and if they want to obviously get back in afters as well.
Darley's obviously a little bit on the older side. She's 33. Both players playing in NWSL, which maybe doesn't help them get in. Where do you fall, Nedum, on that?
No, I think it's interesting because there are obviously different ways to do it. But if you still have a good relationship with your teammates, then I'm not as against it, if you know what I mean. But when it seems like you're almost separating yourself from it, then I think I'd take a bigger issue with it. Because I think if I was part of a group and I saw somebody upset somewhere, I'm not really bothered because I'm still like in the squad and we've got a tournament to get ready for. And I think at times, and I mean this with all due respect to outsiders, I think sometimes the drama that's sought from the outside is very different to the drama that actually exists inside. Because someone said, oh, you must be so bothered that somebody's tweeted this. Half the squad probably haven't even seen it. You know, you might have to answer a question on it, but in reality, you're just doing what you love doing, which is playing football. And I would say as well, in this day and age, this is where I'm kind of pro player. I think at times it's very hard to get your own message out, but now you have a chance to be able to do so. And yes, it comes with consequences as such, but it's very tough. I think the more you play and the longer you go without being able to express how you actually feel about things. So somebody coming out and saying it, that's their therapy as such. This is how I feel. This is how much it means to me. And in some ways, it sort of sets the record straight from how you feel, because otherwise people will tell you how you feel. And I think as a player, that's a really tough position to be in.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, Kenza Darley was pretty spicy. In her interview with Tom Garrett at The Garden, she said, I will tell my story after the Euros. A lot of lies have been told.
See, that's the thing. Everyone here, obviously Gilly's like, you're rock solid. And to be fair, I'm like, yeah, I never would do it either. But if you felt people are lying about you and then this narrative is rolling against you, do you just sit back and let it be? Or do you feel you've got to go and say something? And it's your chance to say something on your own platform.
Do you know what? I think that goes for everyone, because if you can be trigger happy on socials, I think that's not just for professional athletes. I think it's for anyone who sometimes you've got to decide, do I keep this in the group chat or do I put it publicly on social media? And maybe if I'm Kenza Darley and I'm 33 and this felt like a really good opportunity where I could win something in my country, I might be pissed. But if I was a bit younger, I would probably consider it more, because I'd think, what's the best way for me to get a chance back in?
But what would happen if you feel you've been lied about?
I would just tell lots of journalists and get them to do it instead, which is what a lot of people do instead. Jessy,
I think the other thing that's hard is like, and again, this is a thing where like when you're on the outside and, you know, talk about this, Germany, France, England, like all of these teams have had instances around this recently, is the complaint about that person or player being like, I believe I should have been in the squad, because that's often how it's presented. And then I think it comes across as this ego thing. But often, and I can't remember exactly what she said, but I think Feli Rauch's comment in particular was also about like how this conversation was had with me. And that's obviously something that we're never going to be privy to, but I think really muddies the waters around this, because it's one thing to be left out of a squad and it's another thing with maybe, you know, if the manager's even having a conversation with you about that before they're doing that, or, you know, like if you're someone like Rauch or Renard, and, you know, I mean, Renard is someone who's had on and off struggles with the French team anyway, but like let's take Ralph for example, and you've been playing in this Germany squad since you were 2021 like super consistently, and suddenly you're just not in a squad, and if you're not had a conversation with that about what's happening, then of course I think that's a different level of frustration than to just being like, I believe I should be there.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and because it's France as well, there's always just a little bit of drama. I mean, even the quotes from Laurent Bonnadet before the Nations League squad, when he did drop them already, he was talking about insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting the same results, etc. So the quotes are always entertaining.
I also, you know, understand that as well. Like I still think Renard is a player, for example, who you could take because she could do a job for you. But we've just spoken about how France have had a lot of talent, have come close multiple times, but not been able to get it over the line. If you as a manager are like looking at your squad and saying, you know, what's gone wrong before? Why hasn't this happened? And if you think, say, there are, you know, cultural expectations or like cultural things that have come to be founded within your national team and you're trying to change that, maybe you do need to say, okay, I need to change the captain. I want someone new, and therefore I don't want the old captain there because I think that's going to be disruptive. Like, I think that's part of management, which is also, you know, a tough thing to have to deal with the different cultures that exist within dressing rooms. And, you know, France have historically, had a lot of sort of issues with their managers. And I can see why maybe you're saying, okay, I want to come in and give it a fair shot. And he'll be judged on whether it works or not. And at the end of the day, if you're trying to keep your job as a manager and you think that's what you need to do, you're going to do it. So...
Yeah, which maybe is a perfect segue into England and managing
Well,
squads.
exactly.
I mean, I was going to save it till after Netherlands, but we've got to go into it now because it is. There's a lot of similarities. So we've already talked about the changes that have happened in the last couple of weeks for England. There will be no Mary Earps, who has retired from international football. There will be no Fran Kirby, who's retired from international football. There will be no Millie Bright, who withdrew from selection for the Euros about a few days before the final squad was announced. So similarly, there are some big names there. Sarina Wiegman has had to answer a lot of questions about disruption, about noise, about managing personalities, about creating good culture. And there's similarity in France in that sense, with leaving out a big experienced defender in Millie Bright, or her decision. And also, you know, players who played a big part, players with big personalities like Mary Earps, someone who was a leader. Again, her decision not to be part of the squad. She was, you know, Sarina Wiegman had a role for her to play that she will not be playing. But for England, there is time for them to kind of heal and move on from that noise. But the question really is going to be, how well do they start this tournament? And whether, if things don't go to plan, is that noise going to catch up with them, Jill?
I just think with England, it's sort of a bit that those obviously in regards to the choices, obviously in regards to those players, obviously it's a difficult one, but I think with England it has to be, we put that to bed in the sense of, obviously Mary Earps makes that decision for whatever reason, obviously whether it be because she's not the number one. Obviously Millie, in regards to her injury, she's not feeling 100%. Obviously we spoke about with Fran. I still think Fran can do a job for England because I think she offers you something completely different to the others. But I feel like it's one of them ones where it's when it was a player, when I was playing, and it was players potentially who'd been left out, or even players who chose to leave the team, and we're still talking about them. I was a bit like, as a player, like, they're done and dusted in the sense of they don't want to be here or they're not here. So we're going to focus on the players that are here and are now, because ultimately we're the only ones that can do something. So I think it's about the noise, sort of cutting that out and focusing on the players that you do have. And for me, I think obviously with Lauren Hemp coming back, I think that's a huge player coming back into the England team. And it's just about dealing with the cards that you got and being positive and saying, listen, obviously you're the holders, do you know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of pressure on you anyway as England without all this noise and outside influences happening too. It's not ideal, but it might make things harder as such because there's a lot more eyes on us, but we're the holders and we've got to go and do what we've got to go and do, which is hold on to it.
And what is so simple about this group for England, which is a tough group, is really the question, if you want to be the best, you got to beat the best. And they're going to have to do that very quickly because they start against France and Netherlands, and their easiest game against Wales comes last, and they'll know a lot about where they stand by the time they get to that last game. And much like the return of Lauren Hemp is big, Lauren James, Jessy, and what England knows she can do if she's fit, and the magic she can create out of nothing, that's going to be really important as well.
Yeah, I think Lauren James being fit for this tournament totally changes my perception of how England can do. Obviously, we'll sort of have to see how she looks. She's not played football for a while, so whether that impacts her. But I think she is just someone who we've seen can totally run games for this team. And, you know, we saw in that Spain game against Wembley, can run games against the best opposition that England are going to come up against. So going to be interesting as well to see how Wiegman fits her in. Obviously, when she had that very good game against Spain, she played off the left because Hemp was injured. But Hemp will presumably play off the left. Does Wiegman risk, in inverted commas, playing LJ as the 10? because there's been question marks over sort of her defensive attributes, but I do think that's something she's improved on so much this season. Does she play her off the right and leave Beth Mead out? Because I think Mead feels like she's going to get that starting spot there. How does that impact subs if that happens? Because Mead for Kelly feels like a very natural swap that she can do. So it's going to be really interesting to see how she fits in. But yeah, I think LJ is someone who, yeah, we've seen her just turn games on their head, especially for England. I think even more so than Chelsea, because when you're playing against players who've played, opposition players who play against you twice a year for years and years, they get a better idea of how to deal with you. When you're playing against international opposition, it's so much harder, I think, for teams to be able to stop players at that level because they're not as prepared for it. So yeah, massive boost for England, and I think really does change the way I see their chances.
Nedum, where do you stand on England?
Vibes are a bit off, aren't they? I was listening to your last podcast as well about the squad and, you know, players that are missing, and say some of those who have either retired or pulled themselves out. But when you go back further and you're losing the likes of, say, Jill Scott, for example, and the energy and the sort of experience that they had in that time. So I was lucky to speak with Jill just the other week about that whole tournament. And like the experience does matter. But then also I think a good thing that the two of you mentioned was the fact that, say, however many years ago, like Russo and Toon and stuff, they weren't like the names that we see today. So some of these younger people that are coming through, the ones who don't have that same experience, they have the chance to become what they became. Because I don't know, maybe it's revisionist history in my mind, but obviously it was being played at home and Gilly, you were very positive about it. But say those Sarina Wiegman like substitutions and stuff, did we know from the start of the tournament that's what was going to happen and that's how successful it was going to be? Or is it something that just happened and it just worked really well?
We knew that she had a very sort of set, rigid plan.
Did you believe in it at that point?
And so in terms of those players being the serious game changers that they were, no.
Yeah. So I think obviously it's different to be trying to retain the title, and people kind of know a lot about them now. But then this is now the value of like a Lauren James, because people can know about her, but can you stop her? You know, if she's fit, how can she then link up with the rest of the team? And I think it's an England team that's obviously very capable of winning that first game against France and basically having that as a springboard to go forward. But we have seen, unfortunately, in like the last few months, sometimes some games which maybe we wouldn't have enjoyed as much. But in fairness to England, I feel like every time I see them have a bad performance, they seem to counter it the next time they play a team and find a way to sort of get a result. So I'm positive right now, but obviously we'll have to see after that France game, because that's going to be a great way to start the tournament.
Yeah, England have to start well. That's where I see it. If they start well, I think they can do well in this competition. If they don't, I think they could struggle. Let's get on to the Netherlands quickly before we then finish on Wales, because their squad is this kind of weird balance between some much older players who are in their 8th major tournament. Sharida Spitzer is one of them. And then some younger names who we saw kind of maybe break out a little bit in 2022. It's a talented group, but it's still a team that I don't think maybe are in the best form yet coming in. But they still have exciting players there who, when they are fit and when they are playing well, can cause problems and do something. But Netherlands might be the biggest side who might actually not make it to the quarterfinals, Jessy.
Yeah, I think Netherlands are obviously, like I would say France and England are the favourites to get out of this group, but we know that Netherlands have the quality to cause problems. They're also another team whose manager's leaving at the end of the tournament. So that is an interesting factor, especially against England as well, because obviously it's Arjan Vurak who's going to take over there, who's England's assistant manager at the moment. They've got some really exciting young players. And I do think Villa Berman, who's coming to Chelsea at the start of next season, looks like she'll probably start centre-back, and she's had a really good introduction to international football. Jonker obviously really likes Vika Kaptein as well. And what I like about the Netherlands is they can play very direct, and I think that can cause teams issues. But at the same time, they feel that they could be quite defensively exposed. Like in their game against Germany, for example, they lost 4-0. Like Germany scored the same goal about 3 times and then missed the same chance about 2 more times, in terms of like getting a player direct out wide and then having a cut back and having another player run in. And it felt like the Netherlands couldn't necessarily keep hold of where those players were. So obviously in a team with players like Minima, Beerenstein's coming off the back of a fantastic season in Germany, Palova obviously back to full fitness, Jill Roord, I guess, in a bit of an interesting spot in terms of sort of moving on from City and going back home to play for 20. So I do like this Netherlands team on paper. I just don't know if they'll have quite enough against France or England.
I think their squad was always talented, but I think they've unfortunately been put in a group where it's going to be such a big challenge for them. Whereas if they were in another group, I think they'd have a good shot at making it to the semi-finals. Let's get on to Wales then. So excited to be joined by Sion Misra. Sion, tell us first about how amazing it is and how monumental it is that Wales have even got to this tournament.
Yeah, it's been quite a journey. I think we've had so many near misses throughout the last 3 campaigns in particular. You think about losing to England in Newport, missing out on Euro 2022 because we scored 1 less goal than Northern Ireland, despite finishing on the same amount of points and better goal difference. And then the heartbreak against Switzerland to get to 2023, conceding 120th minute winner to Ramona Bachmann. So to finally see us get over that line in Dublin was still special. And I think for the players, the staff, fans, a lot of it hasn't sunk in yet, and we don't quite know when it'll sink in. But I think when we line up for that first game and hear the anthem against the Netherlands, it'll be one of those moments we will never ever forget.
How many Wales fans are you expecting to go out there? Because I've been surprised at the numbers of England fans that are travelling. I think it's around 30,000 they're expected to go. And given how expensive Switzerland is, and there's been a lot of conversation about that, even from England players about their own family travelling, how many are you expecting to go out?
A lot. I think we're the 3rd best supported nation at the Euros currently. I think I've heard of something like there could be 6,000 of us in and around Lucerne for that first game against the Dutch, but everyone is going out. We've got players' families and WhatsApp groups. They're all asking for tickets and everything like that. But yeah, I would expect a lot of Welsh fans to be out there.
Wow, amazing. And tell us about the squad. There was obviously a big squad announcement reveal at the top of Snowdon. Jessy went, you went. It was a real symbolic moment. Rhiannon Wilkinson, obviously the manager, she has a big connection to that place as well. How do you think this squad will do? Because on the face of it, especially in this group, it is going to be a challenge because there aren't as many of the kind of star names or players with decorated Champions League appearances and careers like that. This is a bit more of a rough and ready squad compared to some of the other ones in this tournament.
I think what I like the most is the mix of you've got a good crop of senior players through Sophie Ingle, Jess Fishlock and Hara James, but you've also got some of the younger players like Carrie Jones, you've got Theo Morgan, Hannah Kane, and it's just a good mix of players who have played together for a very long time. And I think that will take us a good distance. Obviously, Sophie Ingle's the biggest question mark, whether having not played since August 2024, whether she would be picked, whether she would play. She's in, and I think even if she doesn't play, just what she brings off the pitch in terms of her leadership, in terms of that standard, I think that other players always want to reach. That'll help a lot. But it's a squad with got a lot of versatility in it as well, which I think you need at a major tournament. And I definitely feel we have the capability to surprise a few for sure.
Sion, talk to us a little bit about Rhiannon Wilkinson, because I hadn't met her before we went up Iorwerth, and I was really impressed by the way she spoke, the way she came across. What sort of impact has she had on this Wales squad, and what's it like having the team be managed by her?
Huge. I think when I talked to her first, she admitted when she first came in, she, despite having 2 wins in those first 2 games, she got it wrong in terms of the culture. She didn't quite understand sort of the Welsh way, the Welsh family. And ever since then, we've seen how she's changed. She's so protective of those players, but also so open, so honest about the challenges she's faced, but also what this team are capable of. And whenever you speak as a fan, you just want to run through a brick wall for her. So I can't imagine what the players want to do for her as well. And I think if you compare it with what we had under Gemma Granger, I think Gemma Granger's tactically a good manager, but whenever you spoke to her, it was sort of you knew what was coming, you knew exactly the way she would act, and you knew the starting 11 as well. You'd be lucky to get a substitute in a game under Gemma Granger. But what Rhian has done, especially with those squad players, because we've seen so many fringe players get so many minutes, and yeah, she's just utilising everyone. And I can't think of a better manager to take us into our first major tournament.
It's interesting you say that about Gemma Granger, Sean, because we were kind of talking about that in our preview for Norway on Monday's show. So I think that kind of regimental approach probably is going to be one to look out for when it comes to Norway. So most importantly, how do you think Wales are going to do? Because they are very much the underdogs in this group, and we've already spoken a little bit about how strong this group is. But what are the expectations? Because we've seen in previous tournaments when teams make their debut, and obviously Northern Ireland at the last Euros, they were in a tough group with England. They had a small but mighty following with them at all their games, but it was a tough tournament for them. How do you think this is going to shape up for Wales?
I don't like that Northern Ireland comparison, the way of the following they're going to get, but I think this is a team far more talented than Northern Ireland had back in 2022. As fans, I don't think we're expecting too much. I think not many are expecting us to get out of the group, but that is a group of players and a group of staff that have very, very high expectations. They will not give up. They will give 110% throughout the whole tournament. And I do think we have the capability to surprise a few people. I think that Dutch game is so important because I think the attacking talents they have is a little scary compared to our defence. But I look at France, we've played quite recently, and I look at that England team, and it doesn't particularly scare me. And I don't think it'll scare a lot of players, a lot of fans. So, and we can play with no pressure, and we really like using that underdog tag. So, if the teams want to underestimate us, go ahead and do it because we'll have the capability to punish them.
Love it. Well, thank you so much for joining us. And I know you're going to be doing some bits for the cutback during the Euros, so obviously people can read your stuff there. And hopefully we'll get you on again to talk all things Wales. And when are you heading off to Switzerland, Sean?
July 3rd.
I'll see you out there for the Wales game. Good luck and enjoy the next week or so in the build-up.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Really interesting to hear from Sean there about Wales's chances of getting out of Group D. And I think it's going to be really exciting to see their fans out in Switzerland as well. So we're going to be talking England, obviously, on Monday off the back of their final warm-up game, their big send-off against Jamaica. So we'll leave things there for today. Nedum, so great to have you with us for our preview shows. You enjoyed it?
Loved it. Thank you very much.
Jessy, we'll see you on Monday talking England, Jamaica.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
And Jill, see you then?
Yeah, see you later.
All right, see you then.